joy for me to ask John Pearce from our Nave Renovation Task Force to share a word with us this morning.
I am John Pearce, a member of the Nave Renovation Task Force, and delighted to be with you at this service, as various members will be at all the services. There are a couple of others present. I hope that you'll put your hands up so people will know that you are here. There they are, and even up in the balcony, up in the gallery. As a parishioner, I'm very interested in our history, and during my 20-plus years here, I have learned much from Barbara Willis and others. As a historian, I've been deeply aware that the liveliness of our church is continually expressed in the changes we and our forebears have made in every decade of the 158 years God has been worshipped in this wonderful church. We're part of a great stream of people flowing through this space, through time. I think what the Renovation Task Force offers for your review is both in keeping with our history and a remarkable vision for a new enrichment of our worship in the years ahead. I'm delighted to commend to you our report and conceptual plan, of which you can get a copy at the end of this service in the family room, together with a form to submit your comments. Report, comments. We hope you'll get both. Use them. Also, if you can possibly do so, at the end of the service in the family room, our architect, Jim Wollon, will be giving a presentation with slides, and I hope that as many people as possible can stay for that presentation.
Thank you, John. On your way down through the first part of the family room, you can get some juice or coffee and something to eat. There's some on the table there.
Know what he's saying. Yeah. See if he's telling the same story.
Okay. As I was saying, this is an eclectic group consisting of those of us who were involved in M 2000, the last major renovation of St. George's, along with musicians, theologians, theologians, engineers, heating and air conditioning experts, lighting experts, vestry members, and historians. The historians have been vital to this project. As Ed Jones ultimately put it in our parish profile, we are an old parish with a history of new ideas. And I believe that in addition to the expression, familiar with the concept of drawing from the past and living into the future has led us to where we are today. What you are about to see preserves the physical St. George's as our parish, our city, our diocese, and our commonwealth has come to expect. Based upon living into the future, it also extends the physical St. George's to support the vision expressed in our parish profile as we search for a new rector. Jim Daniels is the initial instantiation of that vision for the future, and I believe that what you're about to see is the next. First, I'd like to introduce Paige Martindale to talk about the pipe organ possibilities, and then we'll turn the meeting over to Jim Wollon and the Nave Renovation Task Force members for the presentation. And could I get the task force members to stand up, please? Okay, as I said, a rather eclectic group. You'll probably find some other words to describe them also. Okay, Paige.
I didn't know I was supposed to talk.
little misimplication here. Paige has a handout that he's going to pass out to talk a little bit about the organ, so you can do that at your leisure. And then I'll just go ahead and let Jim Wollon.
I've got to hold both of these clickers, and can everybody hear me without using the mic? We'll try that. Well, we're talking about this church here, and we'll immediately go inside because, no, not immediately. We'll get inside once we get back to St. George's. Sorry about that. I want to start with a very brief background of church architecture in Virginia. Now, Virginia was a rural colony, colonial period, and it never produced churches like these in Charleston on your right and Philadelphia on your left. Nothing like that ever happened in Virginia. And these are about the best that Virginia ever produced, but they are very, very excellent churches. And every colonial church we have in Virginia is just an excellent example of its time. All very rural and beautifully designed, but and there's a certain similarity to them. This was our background. Now, St. John's in Richmond is particularly interesting to Fredericksburg because it's wooden. Most of the, almost all of the colonial churches that have survived are brick, but St. John's is wood. And Richmond's the biggest city, so it's odd that Richmond would have only had a wooden church, but of course Richmond wasn't the capital until the end of the colonial period. But this is interesting because it's probably as close in appearance as you'll find to the first St. George's right here on this site, 2 churches ago from the present. At the close of the Revolution, the Church of England in Virginia was outlawed. It was terminated. All property of the Virginia churches was seized by the state. They eventually returned the church and the churchyards and the communion silver, but they seized and then sold the glebe farms that most parishes had. A lot of the churches were up for grabs, and in the case of these 2, the Methodists and the Baptists got them. A number of colonial churches were literally seized by the Methodists, the Baptists, and the Presbyterians, and the Church of England was so dead there was no protest, and they just went to other denominations. A lot of them survived, but in the case of these 2 little colonial churches, in the colonial period they were cruciform buildings, and they've been reduced. This is a terribly depressing time for the Episcopal Church and the recent Church of England in Virginia. And these were just reduced because they were way too big and partly falling down anyway, so they just reduced them to about 1/3 of what they were and repaired them and kept going. Many fell into ruins. Some are still ruins, like the one on the left, and a recent hurricane brought a number of trees down on it and made it even worse. But it had been a ruthless ruin since the period right after the Revolution. And on the right, there was a fire. It finally got rebuilt inside. Not authentic. The authentic reconstruction was not the issue in the 19th century, but at least it did get reclaimed. There was a great awakening in the early 19th century. Your bishops, Moore and Meade, in the early 19th century, saved the Episcopal Church, particularly Bishop Meade. They were great preachers, and they gave their all to reconstituting the Episcopal Church in Virginia, and with their enthusiasm for rebuilding the church, there was a great architectural reawakening also. St. Paul's in Alexandria here is about the first. Very unlike the little colonial churches, really a grand statement of architecture. In this case, designed by Benjamin Henry Latrobe, a major figure in architecture in the new country in the early 19th century. Another big city, Norfolk, Christ Church in Norfolk, a grand expression of church architecture. Nothing like this had been seen in the colonial period. St. Paul's in Petersburg, a little city, and the grand church. It burned within a few years, and they built this one, which still stands in Petersburg. St. Paul's in Richmond. Again, a grand statement of architecture in this reawakening of the church that Bishop Meade should receive the most credit. And it was under Bishop Meade that your church here that we're in today was built. I particularly want to show you the original chancel in St. Paul's. In this period, you don't have an altar centered with a pulpit and a lectern on either side that we're so accustomed to, but this was called the evangelical chancel. The pulpit was centered and usually very high. The holy table, and they didn't call it an altar, it was a holy table down in front of the pulpit, closest to the people. All the liturgical furniture was in a line. I should say this way, it was in a line. And yours was too. That's why I want you to keep this evangelical chancel in mind, just to show quickly, we're not supposed to give a history of St. George.